Hi guys, welcome to The Attic. My name's Mark Jago. I'm a philosophy professor in the UK. Today we're continuing with our Philosophy Glossary, trying to explain some of those tricky terms that we get in philosophy. And today we're going to be focusing on realism and anti-realism. Okay, so these are kind of tricky terms because they mean different things to different people. I'm going to try and give you a very broad, generic outline of what realism and anti-realism might mean and try and point out some of the different things that they might mean to different people. Very broadly speaking, when we're talking about these terms, we're in the realms of metaphysics, and we're talking about whether a certain kind of stuff exists in the world. Okay, so we might be a realist about one kind of thing and an anti-realist about another kind of thing. In general, realists think that the kind of thing we're talking about, chairs or tables or beliefs or numbers or moral values or whatever, realists think that those things exist. And they tend to think that those things exist more or less independently of us as human thinkers, as language users, as people with concepts, etc. Okay, so the realist says that the thing exists in the world independently of us. The anti-realist denies that. And there's different ways you can deny that. You can deny that by saying that kind of thing just doesn't exist, full stop. Or you might deny it by saying, yeah, it does exist, but its existence depends on us in some way. Okay, so that's rather abstract. Let me give you an example. Let's just take a simple example of material objects in general. I'm talking about physical things out there in the world, stuff like my desk here, the microphone, the camera, all that kind of stuff. To be a realist about that kind of thing is basically saying that stuff exists, and it exists whether or not we're thinking about it, whether or not we're talking about it, and so on, okay? It doesn't depend on us for its continued existence. I mean, some of this stuff depends on us in the way that, like, some guy made my desk. If he hadn't have made the desk, it wouldn't have existed. Okay, that's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is now that the desk exists, it continues to exist whether I'm thinking about it or not. When we stop talking and thinking about this desk, it still exists. Okay, that might sound like a very obvious thing to say. That's realism about material objects. It's probably the default view. But take some other cases like moral value. You might not be a realist about moral value. You might think that moral values depend much more on how we think about the world. But just to make it clear what we mean when we're talking about anti-realism, I'm going to stick with the example of material objects, stuff like my desk, and explain how anti-realism might go. Okay, so one kind of anti-realist might say, there's no such thing as material objects. Okay, you might think the world only exists inside your mind, such that there's just nothing out there. Maybe you're a solipsist or whatever. There's just nothing beyond your own mind. In particular, there's no such thing as my desk. So you'd be basically saying there's just no such thing as material objects. That's one kind of anti-realism. But there's a more subtle kind of anti-realism. And this sometimes gets called idealism, okay? And it's the idea that those things do exist, but their existence, their continued existence, and the way that those things are depends on the way we think or talk or conceptualize those things. Okay, so maybe that's not very plausible in the case of material objects, but at least one philosopher thought that it was. Bishop Berkeley, he thought that existence basically depends on perception. So that in order for something to exist, like my desk, someone's got to be perceiving it. Typically, someone's got to be looking at it. Okay, that's a pretty weird view. He had this idea that, well, in order for things to have continued existence so they don't keep flashing in and out of existence, someone's got to be looking at the desk all the time. And, being a bishop, he was like, oh, that person's God. Okay, God is always looking at stuff. That's why stuff always continues to exist. Now, that's a pretty crazy view. Anti-realism, idealism about material objects is a bit counterintuitive to a lot of people, but it's more plausible in other cases. So take the example of money or financial value in general. Why is it that this bit of metal or this bit of paper or this number on my phone has financial value? It's not really something intrinsic to the coin or to the note. It's really about the way that we interact with those things and in particular with each other. If we just stopped treating this note as something that has financial value, it wouldn't have any value. If I couldn't take it into the coffee shop and buy a coffee with it anymore, its value would just vanish, okay? So it's much more plausible to be anti-realist about things like financial value, perhaps about things like moral value, aesthetic value, that kind of stuff. Okay, so we're not going to get into the arguments here and talk about which viewpoint is right, which viewpoint is wrong. I just want to try and get a bit clearer on what those terms mean. So one further thing that we can say is you don't have to be a realist or an anti-realist right across the board. You can be realist about some things and you can be anti-realist, idealist or whatever about other things. That's probably a much more plausible view to take. Okay guys, so there we have a quick intro to realism and anti-realism. I hope you found it useful. If you have, you can do me a favour, you can give this video a thumbs up. That really helps me out. I'm going to be doing plenty more of the Philosophy Glossary coming up soon, so if you want to see more of that, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to get notifications. Thank you for watching this far. I hope you've enjoyed it and I hope to see you back here soon.